In this video, I'll discuss rendering animations. The setting may look familiar as a candle scene that I set up for my lesson on random motion using expressions, except now it has a little candle flame in it, which I threw together really quickly, and you actually see it dancing around with the wiggling point light. I threw that together really quickly, but if you do want to see a video on how I made this, please leave a comment in the comment section. I want to make sure my render settings are set up properly and everything else. First things first, I grab my camera, make sure that you can see that I've got this keyframed. That means if I move my camera around, I wiggle in here and it jumps back to my position. That way I don't have to worry about losing it. I've already got my resolution gate set up. And I'll just be using these default width and height settings for it. I do want to set up some AOVs. First of all, add in an ID. Diffuse. I think I've got emission on here. Shadow matte. Specular direct, specular indirect. This time I am using subsurface scattering in my wax candle, which I'll show you in a minute. Should not be any transmission. I think this one I do have opacity in my candle flame. So grab that just in case. I think that's everything. I also increased my settings here for my quality for my subsurface scattering to get a better result. See what this looks like if I render it. Arnold, render. The higher I change these settings, the longer this is going to take. That's not too bad. And now if I go to my tab right here, my little drop-down menu, this is beauty. I can check the individual passes. So there's my ID. There's my diffuse. My emission, just my little flame bouncing around up there. Opacity. Okay. Once again, no opacity in this one. I thought it might have been in the flame the way I had set up. So I'm going to go to my AOVs and remove that. Fortunately, it does mean it has to re-render. There's my shadow matte being rendered. Specular direct. There's all the highlights directly on the objects. Specular indirect has all my reflections, has my reflection of the tablecloth, and reflections of reflections, that sort of thing. And the subsurface scattering. That's the candle wax right there, glowing from the flame. So now check that out. I can go ahead and close that. I'm going to do a quick save scene as, so I don't have to set those up again. I'm going to change my menu set from modeling to rendering. Under render right here, I want to point out there is render sequence and batch render. Batch render is what we used to use before Autodesk acquired Arnold as a rendering engine. Now, the advantage of batch render is that apparently you can use it to farm this out amongst multiple computers. But there's some sort of a licensing issue with Arnold, which means that if he uses even on just one computer at a time, it expects better payment for the license and will slap a a watermark on every single image you render, which is why they add in render sequence, which only works one computer at a time, but does not throw the watermark on it. Now, the good news is you can still do this sort of the old-fashioned way of creating a render farm, which is to use multiple computers, set your scene up in each computer, and then tell each computer to render out a different sequence of frames. So if I go back to common, go back up here to the top, I'm going to first put a name on this, handle, image format, either PNG or TIFF. I'll just use PNG. Color space, frame animation extension right here. Right now it's going to only render a single frame, so I'm going to change this to something that has a number and an extension as well as a name. I tend to use name underscore number dot extension. I just prefer the way that it arranges the names. And if I look up here, it's going to be a render pass. It's going to put it in a folder that's going to say beauty SSS diffuse ID, all the other ones I made. And then inside the folder is going to have candle, because that's the name I gave it, underscore, because that's what I have here. As we frame 001 to frame 0010, and then .png, which is the extension. That's what this means. Frame padding controls how many numbers are used to save each frame. This is a frame padding of 4. If I change that to 3, then it's only using 3 digits. I tend to leave this at the default, unless I know I'm going to render a lot more than 1,000 frames, or I guess 9,999 frames. Otherwise, things start getting out of order. And then down here, start frame to end frame. So if I wanted to render this on multiple computers, I would have one computer. If say I wanted this to be a 30 frame render, I'd have one computer render 1 to 10, one computer render 11 to 20, and another computer render 21 to 30. I don't have multiple computers to run on right now, so I'll just leave that from 1 to 30. This will be 1 second long, provided that I have that setting correct. 30 frames per second. The animation should work the same because it was based on time, not on frames. Now this is going to be 30 frames per second, and this is going to be from frame 1 to frame 30, which will be 1 second long. The reason I picked 1 second long for this rather than making a longer animation is, one, I'm not doing anything with this that needs a longer animation, and two, because this is a completely random motion, there's no reason for me to have this go forever. I can just loop it over and over again if I wanted to. So a second should be plenty of time. All right, so double check everything. I've got my name, format, name underscore extension, my frame padding, start frame, end frame. This is rendering from my perspective. You can set this to any camera in your scene. You can also add new cameras if you want. I got my width and height set up. Always say before you start rendering, because rendering is a very resource intensive process. And the last thing you want is for Maya to crash and to lose all the settings you set up here. I have to do it all over again. Good news is, if Maya does crash during the rendering process, it saves the frames out one image at a time, which means that all I have to do is reload Maya and tell it which frame to start on, and it'll render the rest of them without losing any information. All right, so render sequence. And it'll see just render out one image at a time and then save it. I'm not going to sit here for the entire process. I'll show you really briefly what this looks like once it's done with this one frame. And then I'm going to stop the video. And the next video, I'll have these all finished rendered. And I'll show you how to put them together in After Effects. So it has one already done. Here's my images folder. And you can see it's got a folder for each one of these. Here's my beauty. And I got my diffuse. If I left and right arrow, you can see my shadow jumping around. Emission. So my flame wiggly. My ID. Now you notice saving these out as a sequence, it saves them as grayscale images instead of color. There's a reason why it does that, and I'll show you that in the After Effects video next week. You still see that little candle wiggle, candle flame wiggle, I guess. Not as obvious as happening in that one, but I was able to just barely see there was something happening. You can see as the light gets brighter, dimmer, light passes through the candle deeper. Yeah, that's all those. I'm going to stop recording and pick this up in my next video.